On February 9th, the Atma Classic record label released a recording called Voyage that features the outstanding Canadian pianist Philip Chiu playing the music of Debussy and Canadian composer Alice Ho. For regular listeners of Classic 107, the name Philip Chiu will be a very familiar one. He has made recordings with the phenomenal cellist Cameron Crosman, the star violinist Kirsten Leong, and has recorded a solo CD called Fables that won Chiu a Juno Award for Best Classical Solo Album in 2023. Tracks from all of these recordings get played here on the station regularly. Aside from his recordings, he is the pianist with Ensemble Made in Canada, Canada's premier piano quartet. He's also performed with the likes of Emmanuel Pahud, James Ennis, Raphael Volfish, Jonathan Crow. He's toured Canada 14 times with the support of Prairie Debut, Jeunesse Musicale, and Debut Atlantic, and created a collaborative piano program at the esteemed Domaine Forget in Quebec. And the list goes on and on. Simply, he is on the top tier of pianists and piano collaborators on the scene today. And joining me here over Zoom to talk about his latest CD, Voyage, I am thrilled to be joined by Philip Chiu. Hey, Phil, it's great to see you again.
Likewise, Chris, I have to be honest with you. You almost made me want to hang up the call once you started talking about all the things I've done. I appreciate it. It's so embarrassing at the same time. but it is a reminder. It is a reminder of how privileged we are as musicians, to have these opportunities to do these things. So thank you for saying all that.
My pleasure. My understanding is right now you're on the East Coast. Where exactly are you and what are you doing? Are you playing a concert or?
What am I doing, Chris? I'm in Halifax, Nova Scotia at the moment. Kind of on a whim. We don't have to get into all of it. We only have so much time, but I
Mm,
decided to move out here in September of 2023.
ah,
Practically on a whim. I have some very close friends out here. I'm a hearted true city boy, but in the last few years, I really found myself wanting the ocean and wanting
ah,
more air and wanting a bit more space. And I've always loved this city, and there's great cultural things happening here. So I decided to move out here. So that's what I'm
mhm,
doing at the moment.
fantastic. The recording voyage is just great. Both Simon and I just love it. Thank you so much. It's being programmed here like your other stuff all the time. Before we get to the actual music and inspiration for Voyage, the booklet says you're in the process of recording a triptych of CDs with Atma Classics, where you pair up distinguished composers with commission works. Is Voyage, is this CD the second volume of that triptych? And can
Yeah,
you
that
talk about that project a bit?
of course. So I'm going to mention the word that we can't get enough of, COVID. This was kind of a COVID inspired project where I had done a fair amount of recordings. Again, I feel so privileged with different some of those colleagues that you mentioned, Cameron Crosman and others with ATMA. And when COVID rolled around, it was really this forced stop, and I had to kind of reckon with what that kind of stop of momentum. Besides the how disturbing it can be, it kind of forces you to kind of reckon and think about, reflect on where you're at and what you want to do. And so, anyway, I approached ATMA and I just said, "Would you be interested in some solo recordings?" Yada 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 yada. They eventually accepted my proposal of 3 discs. I mean, I would have been thrilled if they agreed to record half of a disc of solo of mine. If they had no reason to accept that I would be a soloist or be a reputable one, but they
Mm,
agreed to a 3 disc kind of contract. And so, yeah, this is the second of those.
mm,
French music is music that, so they're all sort of anchored around great French music. And
mm,
for me as a pianist, it's the music that for sure that gives me the most joy. It's the music that I think offers such beautiful, unexpected colors from the piano. And that's what I really love to explore.
mm-hmm. And the first CD in the set was the Fable CD with Ravel, and help me out with the pronunciation of the name, Barbara
Uh,
Hassan.
a, si-
Uh,
a Siganak.
Asingana, yeah.
Yes.
Uh, in the booklet for this latest CD Voyage, you start out by asking questions in this little blurb at the beginning of the booklet. Where do we belong? To who do we belong? What belongs to us? And what is ours simply because it is handed to us? And what is ours because we choose it? You say the album is deeply personal to you. And from what I gather, the CD is inspired by your own recollections of your family's story. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, of course. So I was born in Hong Kong, and I was 3 when our family came over to Canada. And very quickly, I kind of abandoned. I can't say this was a very conscious choice so much as it was just I quickly abandoned my language, my mother tongue, Cantonese, and I started learning English. And from there, like I very much I wanted to fit in. I was a young child at school, and I very much wanted to assimilate. And over the years, like I rarely ever ask questions about my heritage. And what's funny is that even though I myself know that, like I think of myself as almost kind of an apostate Chinese boy. Um, from the outside and to kind of the innocent bystander, like I might as well be an authority on Chinese culture when really I'm kind of the furthest thing from,
Mm,
you know, and in recent years, we've had so many interesting and important and vital conversations about even just within our art form about who gets represented,
yeah,
about
yeah,
who
yeah.
gets included, about the different kinds of voices. And those are so critical conversations, and I appreciate them so much. And I appreciate the inclusion of different voices. In fact, that's very much what inspired my albums and the composers that feature on them. And at the
Mm,
same time, I want to look at someone like Debussy, who was so very much, and Ravel, so much inspired by other cultures that they knew very little about. And in some ways, like Debussy, he had a great fascination, like the French at that time, with entre guillemets in air quotes, with the Orient and with the East.
mm,
Um, and and one could take the view that, wow, how offensive that they sort of wrote this music that sort of sounds Asian-y, sounds, you know, and I like to take a kind of a different view of it, which is that at the same time, I think of given the context of what we're looking at, Debussy was no less an authority or no less sort of unaware of what Chineseness was than kind of I am. Like, what does it mean that I'm born Chinese? Like, what do I really know about where I'm from? You
mm.
know? And
Yeah.
so I kind of try to put it through that lens. Recent years I've been asking my parents more and more about where they came from, where our family came from, what we are about. You can imagine from immigrant parents, they also don't want to spend too much time on the past. They are looking ahead to the life they can create for their children, i.e., me.
Right. Right.
Um, and so I realized it was actually very much on me to express to them my interest to understand a bit more about where I come from.
Where you
And then
came from.
from there, and not really with a goal, not a goal about, okay, because this, but just appreciating that knowing a bit more will lead me somewhere or will deepen my appreciation for XYZ.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
maybe that's a little bit what I'm trying to share here, my
Mm,
exploration of those things.
hmm. The CD has music of Debussy. It's got his Petite Suite, the Image, the first book, and the Estampe, the Prince. One of the things that struck me when I first listened to the CD was the colors and contrasts that you're able to get with the music. You say you love French music. When did you start playing Debussy? And when you're practicing his music, are you constantly thinking about colors, textures, and touch at the piano? How do you approach his music when you're learning it?
These are great questions, Chris. So I would have started with French music probably when I was at Glen Gould with my teacher, Jenny Regier, and then also the teacher that followed, Marc Durand. Not because he's French, but he did have a great capacity for expanding our concept of what this music can be.
Mm,
There's something about the French sensibility in terms of the writing for the piano that just absolutely kind of I gravitate towards so much when I sit down and I look at a score. It's like Ravel, for example, it's no less structured than Mozart. You know what I mean? It's not like people sometimes approach it with this kind of, oh, it can be, it's wispy and it's all this kind of wishy-washy stuff, but that's not totally necessarily the case. And same with Debussy. It's extremely well structured. It's practically, I mean, it's extremely mathematical. Like Debussy's work, if you read it in the program notes, so
yes,
much of it is based on the golden ratio. Like it's very specifically
I,
so.
I was going to get to this. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Can you talk about the golden ratio? And in particular, how does it relate to the piano music on the CD? I know the golden ratio sort of from the Fibonacci series because I had a friend who is super into the Fibonacci series. What is it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is essentially that, but it's just the strong belief that he had, and it presents itself in the Reflet dans l'eau, also again in the Hommage à Rameau, the first two movements of the Image set, where everything. like the size of the phrases that you see, even the dynamics that he builds and how they kind of elongate and how they grow and grow and grow. It's all based on that kind of those mathematical proportions. And so if you kind of listen to both of those back to back, they climax at kind of that same ratio. It's this belief that that is where the most impact is going to
Uh,
be, and where everything should sort of build towards, and where things should come away from.
so what is the ratio in the
The
Golden?
number I couldn't. It's kind of two thirds ish.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, it's kind
Yeah.
of two thirds ish. But I mean, more importantly for me, yeah, I'm going to circle back to your question about like what I think about when I practice. I don't think about the ratio so much as I think about what they were inspired by. I think about not only the visual arts, because that's like a really obvious um, line that we like to draw, but it's I just try to explore any kind of other colors that it can be, ev- anything else that it can be,
Mm,
and what kind of textures are possible, what
right.
kind of, like I
Uh,
think it's so closely tied to nature in a way that I like to think, because we talk about water, we talk about air, we talk about light reflecting, and whereas we can think about German music, which would talk about nature, was very much inspired by nature, like walk through nature, but in a more narrative sense. Like
yeah.
I really use those things as launching points for what sound can be like and how they can relate to one another.
Hmm. I had a music theory teacher once say to me, Debussy's music is like a plant. It grows out of these little melodic fragments that he presents at the beginning, and the rest of the music grows out of that. First of all, do you agree with that statement? And if so, can you talk about like that, how that happens in the piano music?
Wow, that's a really good question, Chris. And you had a very good theory teacher. I mean, I
Well,
think it's like a. Go ahead.
the backstory was I was sitting there in the library ripping my hair out, trying to do a harmonic analysis of some Debussy prelude, and she just
Yeah.
happened to walk into the library and said, "What are you doing?" And she's like, "No, you can't analyze Debussy like that."
What did she tell you instead?
She
That you should
said,
look at what's.
"Yeah," she said exactly that. She said, you got to look at the material that he starts it out with and how he builds out the piece from there."
Yeah, I think that's really true. It's not like halfway along the way he will introduce something that has sort of come from nowhere. I think that's true, actually, and I think that's a really great statement. And to be perfectly frank, I don't think I ever would have sort of consciously put it that way.
Mm,
But that's so true, and I think that's what I really take to it. I think that's why I love this. I feel like any Debussy piece of music, from the moment you start listening and the moment I think about when I start playing, I think it always allows us to think in right away. I love being able to give listeners the sense, and it's so great that you share this. Yeah, this sense that from the very start, I'm
mm,
going to give you kind of everything that you're going to hear, but like wait to see how it transforms. And I think that's very much the case with every single work on that disc of his.
yeah.
Everything you hear from the start, it'll come back in all different kinds of shapes and forms, and it will take a journey each time, but it's going to come back, especially at that sort of two thirds ratio. You will often get this return. It's always extremely satisfying, and I think that's right. He throws you the kind of curveballs that I think are so great in music of Debussy and Ravel. Is that the curveballs are not sort of, oh, what a weird harmony, or whoa, this sort of came out of left field. It's more like, oh, the texture of that, how that voice comes, how that theme I knew comes back. Like I couldn't have
Yeah.
envisioned how
Yeah.
that could work. I couldn't have seen that transformation. So it's familiar in a whole new, but it's familiar feeling, but totally different perspective and a totally different lens.
Yeah. And he still manages to get across uh, what he's trying to get across. I think of the Pagodas piece in
Oh,
particular that pops firstly into my mind, and it sounds
yes.
exactly that, like his influence from the Japanese gamelan, etc. Yeah.
I
Hmm.
think like, yeah, the Indonesian, it's like I love the sense. It's the same reason I love like music of Mendelssohn's. The same reason I love um, it's this feeling of home somehow. It's that he offers you something, you go on a journey, but I always felt love this guarantee that there's going to be a homecoming. And I've always gravitated towards that sort of sentiment in music.
Hmm. Uh, you've recorded the Petite Suite on the CD, which was originally written for piano four hands. But on this recording, you're playing a transcription that was done by Jacques Durand for solo piano, but you ended up making some revisions yourself. What exactly did you do to Durand's transcription?
And so to answer this, I'll also put into context or just mention that also on Fables, I did the same thing. I also did the Mother Goose Suite, an arrangement from the forehand. And so on one hand, it's because these are, I mean, it's manifold. You know, I have a piano duo with a really great pianist, Janelle Fung is her name, based in Montreal,
Mm,
professor at the Conservatoire, a lovely pianist.
yep.
And we've played these works quite a lot, the Petite Suite and the Mother Goose, and they're works that I adore so much. And sometimes you mention them to pianists and they're like, oh, like I didn't know. Because, you know, some pianists sort of, some maybe you'll come across it if you're reading for fun. Maybe you think it's like music for kids, but they're masterworks.
Hmm.
Um, Perhaps contextually from a certain time in their output. But the Mother Goose Suite for sure is just an incredible work, bar none. He orchestrated it. It's played. It's done in every formation. And so these are works that I wanted to just sort of play around a little bit with and just share like my version of it. You know, the same way the Emerson did the Mendelssohn octet, but
It,
it's just the quartet twice.
overdubbed, yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's that kind of fun. So my all that to say, the existing arrangements of the pieces are, for the most part, quite good. But in some cases, they feel almost like they were done sort of just as a study format.
Mm,
So sometimes it's all kind of jammed together in a way that was too thick, or other times I felt like they were oversimplified so
okay.
that it could be executed without too much effort. And so I tried to make judicious decisions or choices about when to. I think because I always want to pull it back to what I would say with air quotes, like the authentic, which is the forehand, and
Yeah.
and 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 do my best to recreate what I think the forehand texture offers without overcomplicating it from a solo version such that it detracts from it. Like I don't think that, you know, like anytime I basically started from, okay, if I put all the notes back in from the, you know, duet version, does it just sound like a bad solo pianist now?
Yeah.
Whether that's just me or the arrangement, I wouldn't always know, but I would say, yeah, I think this is too clunky now. So then I would start to pare away a little bit. But
Mm.
generally, it was trying to return back to the source material and work from there.
So for the most part, you're adding notes to the texture.
Or returning things. Often, what would happen is they would knock down melodic lines a full octave
Okay.
because because it would involve too much jumping, and
Yes.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
and I just didn't always buy that because I thought, because to me those choices are actually really critical. I think
Yeah.
because, right, depending on the tessitura that we're playing in the piano, the
Yeah.
register we're playing it
Of course.
totally changes those colors, and so I wanted
Yeah.
so much to preserve those color possibilities again without over clunkifying it. That's the technical jargon.
And what and
Clunkifying.
what and one of the things for me about Debussy is he's all about color, and I think he had a very specific idea in his mind what he wanted to create in the sense of a color palette. There's a big difference in playing a C in one register than playing it in the other, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I think by this time they're so specific with what they're looking for. They understood so well. I try to talk about this with students all the time, or it's that the different registers of the piano. I mean, of course, we talk about different pianos, but the different registers of the piano, they sing so and speak so differently. And I
Mm,
know that I see in the writing of this French piano music that they were ever more aware of what that meant and very specific with those choices.
hmm Aside from the Debussy, there are these really fantastic Debussy-esque type pieces by Alice Ho called Hong Kong Nostalgia. Can you talk about them? You commissioned them. Why did you
That's right.
choose Alice Ho to compose them?
So, I mean, Alice is a composer that's been on the scene for a while now. She's so lovely, and she, like Alexina Louis, like other great Asian Canadian composers, isn't afraid. Or clearly, I would like to think, in seeing her output, is very proud to use like our heritage, her heritage, our culture as source material for writing great classical music,
Mm,
and has like far surpassed like cliche use of it, like really has embraces it so fully that I find it very inspiring. And so some people had suggested to me I should, because I was looking for an Asian Canadian composer, that was quite important to me. I wanted
Mm.
someone because I'm working at this from the wrong way. What I knew I wanted to do, as I did in Fables, was was create a companion work. In Fables, that was the Mother Goose suite that I had asked Barbara Siganak to write a companion piece for. And so she was inspired by the element of little things, small things that she created this piece, the abundance of insects.
Mm.
And so for this disc for Voyage, I wanted to find someone who would create a work based on the estampe as a companion piece to the engravings, the printings,
Yeah,
because it starts with the pagodas.
right.
Again, it's a sort of travel log. And so I wanted someone who could sort of take those same themes. So basically, we have pagodas, which is talking about spiritualism, a little bit of architecture. We have the second, the Soirée en Grenade, the evening in Granada, which is
Hmm.
dance and nightlife and those things. And then we have the final reminiscence, right? The rain under the garden. And so I wanted someone who would take those ideas and create another three movement work, not necessarily mirroring everything, but would take it and really show everything from a Hong Kong perspective. I was actually quite specific with my ask. I wanted someone who understood um, Hong Kong in the 60s and 70s. It's
Right.
because around this time I was having conversations with my father about what he was doing in those years when he would have been about my age, or a bit younger, or growing up in those
Yeah, yeah,
formative
yeah.
years of Hong Kong, major
Hmm.
years. And so I really zeroed in on to Alice, who was born in Hong Kong and had understood all of those things much more than I would.
And the three pieces represent three specific locations in Hong Kong. There's the Connaught Center, the
That's
10,000
right.
Buddhist Monastery, and
That's right.
the night markets. Have you been back to Hong Kong since you moved to Canada? And I guess, can you relate to what she's put down on paper musically?
Some more than others. I've been back a few times with my family. I'm such a tourist when I go. Some people ask me, "Oh, does it feel like going home?" I go, "Oh my God, no!" Like people try to talk to me in Cantonese, I can't reply. The only thing that feels familiar is the food, and also hearing them speak. Hear it feels very familiar, even if I can't reply. Um, the Condit Center, yeah, I definitely have seen it, but my father talked a lot about it. It was this symbol of, for better or worse, like extreme development in Hong Kong at that time.
Mm,
And the night market for sure. Like I definitely visited a version of that, and my dad talked about that all the time. That he would spend all his adolescence at the night markets. They would watch That's where my father is an amateur guitarist. That's where he saw bands for the first time. That's where he would go try out things. That's where he was inspired to go find and buy a guitar somehow. Like the food and the sounds and the smells. The one that I really relate to the most is the second movement, the Temple of 10,000 Buddhas. That's a real temple that Alice is familiar with, but it's because I spoke with her about the tradition, that the custom that she knows so well, that is very dear to me in my memories, which is of the time when we would go visit. We would go with my now late grandmother to visit like the not crematorium. I forget the word all the time in English, but where the ashes where my grandfather are stored, and we go
mm,
pay respects. We bring food, we bring oranges. There's a short ritual of incense. There's this whole thing, but it's a very precious memory to me, and I that's kind of all I shared with Alice. But she knew exactly. I didn't have to say more. She knows
yeah,
exactly
yeah,
what that walk is. She knows
yeah.
exactly what it means. She understands these massive temples and the smells and even if you are not, which I am not particularly religious, even if you're not that spiritual, there is a sense
Yeah, yeah.
of
And
something very special to be connected to your ancestry that way there.
yeah, and I was reading that apparently there's these, well, not apparently there's these rising flourishes passages that are supposed to represent the steps up to the, yeah, yeah.
What's funny is that my grandmother, by the time we were visiting, she would have been in her 90s, and we weren't sure. She was like, she would tell us, I don't really feel comfortable in cars, but it was quite a long journey. We said we should probably take a taxi. We took a taxi about two-thirds of the way there from her apartment, and we had to leave. We had to get out because she was going to throw up. She was really quite car sick, and we thought, oh man, are we going to make it? But she walked the rest of the way like ahead of all of us as we were just like sweating and dying on the sidewalk. My grandma was just like powering up. She had no problem walking, and there are so many steps.
Yeah,
It's
yeah, yeah.
quite crazy.
They're great pieces. For you as a pianist, did they create any challenges?
These Alice's pieces.
Yeah,
Sorry,
yeah,
I
yeah.
missed it.
Yeah, Alice's pieces.
Totally. She knows what she's doing. There's times when I'd look at the score and I go, oh, I would write to Alice. I'd say, she was really open to the working process. I really appreciated working with Alice so much. She always wanted my input, and I would say, Alice, I think here this might. Do you think you would consider adding? Even sometimes it'd be adding octaves. I think it might be more effective here. And then sometimes I'd say, oh, Alice, this is like pretty hard to pull off. What do you think about this? Do you have any suggestions? And so, or sometimes her reply would be, oh, try practicing a little bit more. And I would humbly say, okay, I will try this some more. And sometimes that did work, and other times I go back and say, okay, take out one note for me.
Taskmaster.
But she knows piano writing. And so,
Yeah.
yes, absolutely. It presents good, interesting challenges. Absolutely.
Mm. I'm going to wrap up the conversation by asking the question, coming out of the recording project and having put Debussy's music very much under the microscope, did you have any aha moments or any insights that you've never discovered before? And I got to ask, are there any plans to record any other Debussy music? In particular, I'm thinking the preludes or the etudes.
Oh, Chris, what great questions. Aha moments. No, I can't say any aha moments. I'm
Mm,
learning constantly. When I listen back to this recording, um, of course, there are things that I think to myself, oh, this could have breathed more.
right.
Because just as we could focus too much on XYZ, like sometimes even focusing on the colors too much means losing track of just the natural breath of a phrase. Right?
Mhm.
Like it is the joy and like the anguish of being a musician that like I think that we're fortunate to always, I don't know, confront what we think about it, to be able to sort of zero in on something, and that will always mean something else is lost, and to always be experimenting and trialing the different ways of doing things, you know?
Yeah.
So no aha moments, just a lot of learning from hearing myself all the time. Um,
Mhm.
I suppose if anything, I'll leave it with that. I'd say if anything, yeah, it's remembering that first and foremost, the music needs to breathe, that the
Mhm.
coloring is still coloring, and that the you can think all you want about the structure, you think all you want about how to nail that phrase, nail those notes, but like people on the other side, they just want to sit back
Yeah.
and let themselves be carried away. And how important it is for me to keep that in mind as well. In terms of other recording projects, I don't know yet. Maybe. I mean, I love the music so much. Does the world need more? No, actually, here's my answer for you, Chris. It's a great question. I love the prelude so much. I play them quite a lot. The etudes are beautiful. I will want to record them if I feel not only that I have something to say with those pieces, but that I can create a recording, I can create an album and create a project that also shares something about, mm, not just me, but offers a different viewpoint or perspective on the works, and
Sure.
offers something new.
Yeah, and you play Debussy's music so well. Philip, this has been so great to talk to you. The CD Voyage is just great. Big congratulations. Hopefully, we'll see you here in person next time you're in Winnipeg in our Classic 107 studios. Thanks so much for taking the time to talk to me today. This has been great.
Thank you so much for having me, Chris. Always a pleasure.